Thank you everyone for joining. I'm Tarishi Rekhi, Communications Officer at EASPD, the European Association of Service Providers for Persons with Disabilities. And today we're here for a short webinar on the role of technology in inclusive education. So we're doing a series of webinars under a project called ADEDU, which is Accessible Digital Education. And the idea of these webinars is to increase awareness on the topic and increase capacity, do capacity building. So we did a webinar in February, and now it was on the basics of inclusive education, so learning diversities and other terms. Now we're moving on to understanding the role of technology. It's very important to know how we can integrate this into a classroom to make sure that we don't fall into the digital gaps. So ADEDU project has the main project result will be an digital education course. And this course is actually tailored to educators and trainers. It will be a way in which they can ensure that there is inclusion in their classroom with different aspects. One of the aspects is technology. And today we will focus on that aspect. We have our first speaker who will present shortly one of the modules. Currently, we're piloting the course, so it will be interesting to see what you think about this module. With that, I will present to you Leonidas Dimitrios Kotrogianos from IASIS. He's currently studying, he's doing his PhD right now, and I am very excited to have him here to present the module to you. On to you, Leonidas.
Let me share the screen. Hold on. You can see it?
Yep.
Yeah, hi, my name is Leonidas. I'm a PhD candidate on the University of Crete. With PhD thesis inclusive in the vulnerable groups and inclusive in society and education in Denmark, Greece, and England, the case study of my thesis. And I will try today shortly to present you the interactive challenges in inclusive technology and interactive technology in inclusive education, very shortly. So in this unit, we will focus on developing lesson plans that incorporate technology to accommodate diverse learning needs. Participants will learn to design lessons that utilize various digital tools effectively. Digital tools offer in the present opportunities to create truly inclusive lesson plans. They provide flexibility, personalization, and accessibility features that can benefit all learners, especially those with diverse needs. And the most important focus on tools that support UDL, Universal Design for Learning Principles. How digital tools can support its principle, representation, digital textbooks with adjustable fonts, text-to-speech, interactive simulation, action expression, voice-to-text software, digital portfolios, choice boards with technology options, engagement, gamified learning platforms, virtual field trips, collaborative online projects. These tools, the digital accessibility checkers and validators, these tools help ensure digital content is accessible to all students, including those with disabilities. And this is some tools we can where teachers can use in the classroom, and in this in this slides I will present some tools like Google Drive, who can real-time collaboration version, history, accessibility version, Microsoft Teams, centralized platforms for sharing resources and co-creating lesson plans, project management tool to organize lesson tracking like Trello. Some of the technological tools we can use in the classroom to integrate students like digital content creation tools like Canva, Adobe Creative Cloud, like Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, Quiz. We can make it more personalized learning platforms like Khan Academy. More digital tools specific to learning needs, its immersive readers, individual, and digital tools and other specific tools for specific learning, digital forest, freedom. Actually, we have a lot of tools in the technology to help us in the class and integrate students with various histories. So, in conclusion, I like to close. Technology facilitates accessibility and inclusion. Digital tools can be adapted to different learning needs. Teachers have powerful resources at their disposal to create inclusive learning environments. And the integration of technology is not just is not just an option, it's necessary for education that includes everyone. That's a small presentation for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonidas. That was very nice, very concise. To begin with, any questions? Do we have Leonidas? Maybe you can stop sharing your screen.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
If we don't have any questions, we can move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The second part now, the next part of our webinar is on a UNICEF report, which is kind of like a guide for teachers on how to make technology a reality in their classrooms. And today we have Katerina Mavrou. She is an associate professor in inclusive education and assistive technology at the European University of Cyprus. And she has authored the report. So I'm sure if you have any questions, she can definitely answer them. So Katerina, on to you.
Good morning, all. Thank you. Thank you, Tavishi, very much for this invitation. I may say that my relationship with ESPD is long. We've been working together in many projects, and a lot of the things that are included in this guide actually come from projects that we've been doing together and with other partners. So I can start sharing my screen, I guess. Okay, it came through?
Yep.
Good, great. Okay, so while Leonidas was talking, I was just wondering maybe his presentation could be after this one, because I'll try to, but I think people can make the connection. What I will try to do is to present the rationale of this guide and the theoretical framework around what the Leonidas presented as a practical part. So why do we need this accessibility for digital inclusive education, for digital inclusion, for inclusive education in general? So the idea of this guide came, of course, from the need from the attention that is paid in the last 2 or more decades on assistive technology. Actually, currently, AT, assistive technology, and mainstream accessible technology and accessibility gain a lot of attention around the world. There are a number of initiatives around the globe in regional in global levels, regional levels, national levels that highlight this importance. For example, very recently, the World Health Organization, in collaboration with UNICEF, have drafted the global report on assistive technology that are showing what is going around the world currently on the use of assistive technology, accessibility, and mainstream technologies for the lives of persons with disabilities. This started from an initiative of the WHO more than 10 years ago on the GATE initiative for helping countries on developing policies, lists of products, ideas to support the use of technology for accessibility and the use of assistive technology. Similarly, we are aware of the European Accessibility Act at the European level, the Digital Education Action Plan that includes issues of accessibility and inclusive education, the work of the Association of the Advancement of Assistive Technology in Europe, that it's around the same concept, and the recently introduced Global Alliance of Assistive Technology Organizations, and lots of other initiatives that are actually based on what the UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is highlighting and promoting the use of new technologies, assistive technologies, mainstream technologies for improving the lives of persons with disabilities. To realize inclusive education, to make it happen, it's a complex process, actually, and it involves multiple stakeholders in an interplay of processes, activities, communication with a shared vision. This is why we need to be aware of this ecosystem. So the role of education is not outside this ecosystem. On the slide, you'll see there is a 5P framework, 5P for people, policy, products, personnel, and provision, that was introduced by the work of the World Health Organization. I should change this image because now they have a revised one. That places emphasis on the assistive technology service delivery system and the main pillars of this system. So education is not out of this framework. So the role of education is around understanding how inclusive education is a human right, how to achieve inclusive education is a teamwork between multiple stakeholders, including families and the children, the learners. The fact that assistive technology and accessibility needs to start early in life. And to do this, to improve the use of assistive technology, we need to develop competences of various stakeholders. So based on that idea, the UNICEF and the WHO, but mainly UNICEF for this guide, considered that we need to develop a program of capacity development on the use of assistive technology. Because if we underestimate the use of assistive technology in education, we are risking not providing the maximum possible resources for equal opportunities. I mean, the general idea is that AT and accessibility is for the less, so why to invest in that? But this is not the case today, especially since we're all using digital technologies and since we're all developing or having individual needs that may be assessed as disabilities, maybe not, but they are served by what Leonidas mentioned as universal design and universal design for learning. So assistive technology and mainstream accessible technology can be a part of this. Also, as Leonidas highlighted, today the use of technologies, I mean, mainstream technologies and ICT provide a lot of opportunities for inclusion. So the border between what we call assistive technology and what we call mainstream technology or ICT or accessible technology is blurred. And this is why the guide does not pay attention only to specific assistive technology, but to the idea of using technologies for inclusive education. And the need, therefore, these needs of capacity development is essential because the role of assistive technology is becoming essential in the educational practice because children's needs and conditions constantly change. Children become teenagers, become adults, and we need to have a provision of AT throughout the life. Inclusive education, it's the higher imperative for the UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and because research shows that lack of awareness and limited competences are one of the main barriers of not succeeding with the use of assistive technology in education. So this guide is developed for schools and school teams because schools are part of the AT system, because schools and teachers come very early in the child's life, and teachers are the ones that define the learning process. They know their students, they know the curricular requirements, they bring together learning objectives and anticipated outcomes for students to achieve their learning goals. Acknowledging the dynamics mentioned earlier, UNICEF moved to the development of resources. So other than the guide, there are a lot of UNICEF resources that one can find on the UNICEF website. And the idea of this guide is to provide a set of competences for teachers and schools to contextualize the use of assistive technology in an inclusive education ecosystem and assistive technology ecosystem, to give the basic principles of learning design for integrating technology, and familiarize teachers with practices of designing this learning process through some case studies. Of course, this guide, as I said at the beginning, does not really reinvent the wheel. It comes from existing resources and underlying concepts like the SCATE project, which was a project that developed capacity development. And you may also find it useful for the ADEDU project as well. So we built a training program, a learning program for early childhood educators for using technology for inclusive education. Also builds upon the work of the European agency, mainly the literature review conducted for inclusive education, other work of UNICEF, and the Endelis network, that is a network that built several projects. Yes, PD was involved in lots of those projects that are about the technology capacity development of users. So the guide has four sections that build upon four key factual assumptions. I won't analyze this slide because we will talk about it later on. And this is the diagram. It's included in the guide. We don't need to spend time on that. Just wanted to give a picture of the key principles and how these key principles of the guide align with the areas of competences. So what is the guide about, and what are the key principles? Bringing the assumptions and competences together, we'll see what the guide tries to do. The first assumption is that teachers and school teams are the ones that assess the needs and barriers to equal access and participation in the learning process for all learners. To do so, we need to understand how educational practices may reflect on the various models and constructions of disability and diversity. So the guide starts with what is disability and how this is conceptualized around the medical model, the social model, the human rights model of disability, and how these conceptualizations of disability actually have an impact, affect the educational practices, and which end up to be in favor of inclusive education, and which yield some exclusion pedagogies. And that inclusive education, it's for all children. We're talking about children with disabilities, but actually designing learning, universally designing learning, it's about all. So how to do this? The guide emphasizes on acting of teachers and school teams by identifying the barriers, by sharing a vision to reform the educational environment, by converting some practices of exclusion to tools for inclusion, by employing the principles of universal design and differentiated learning that were also mentioned by Leonidas earlier, in ways that integrate technology as a tool for enabling inclusive education. The second assumption is that teachers and school teams participate in the process of choosing and implementing appropriate assistive technology tools. Teachers are not the assessors, right? But teachers need to understand the assistive technology ecosystem, the impact of what is happening around the globe in our national policies, and what are the main products and tools that are available that we can use in our classroom for developing inclusive practices with the use of technology. So how are we going to do that? By getting to know the local service delivery systems and procedures, by being involved in the selection process of technologies, by being involved in how we choose technology and all the tools that were also mentioned by Leonidas, but other tools of assistive technology as well, by familiarizing ourselves as teachers with the basic products and software and applications that are out there. And if we don't know, at least we know where to look for these resources. So the role of the teacher in the process of selecting assistive technology is not to conduct the assessment themselves, because sometimes this becomes overwhelming. There are a lot of models and frameworks for actual assessment for assistive technology or accessibility needs. One of the main frameworks that exist, and they're very relevant to education, is the SET framework by Joy Zabala, that is Student, Environment, Tasks, and Tools. There are lots of others, like the HAT, Human Activity and Assistive Technology model, the Matching Person and Technology model. They all identify the same elements. SET is more relevant to education, and this is why it's used in this guide. The teacher's role in this framework is not, as I said, to do the assessment of selecting assistive technology or accessibility requirements on their own, is to be part of this team. The teacher can be the source of information on what are the needs and the aspirations and expectations of the students and the profiles, information about the environment, anything around the student, even at home, at school, interactions, the tasks that the students are expected to do with the use of technology. Also, teachers are collaborators when deciding on the types of tools that we need to include and use in the classroom, in the learning process. And of course, are the one, their main role is here, that will plan and apply the use of technology and evaluate students' learning and activities with the use of technology. And this is not a linear process, it's a circular process that has a follow-up and re-evaluation stage in all aspects, in all elements. So the third assumption is that of the guide is that teachers and school teams are the ones that design, as we said, the learning processes. So we need to do that by understanding how the principles of universal design and other inclusive pedagogies like differentiated learning are implemented into these processes, and where is technology important into that for participation, collaboration, interaction, and engagement. So by redefining the educational tasks to promote interaction and participation, as educators, we may reach the optimal outcomes of this process. Also, educators, teachers are expected to plan lessons and activities based on the universal design for learning principles to transfer the individual aims, individual objectives of the individual educational plan of a student into the classroom. So work individually for capacity development, for competence development of students, but transfer that into the more general mainstream classroom environment, creating opportunities for the use of technology and actually use these technologies for learning. If we get a framework, a broader framework of the use of technology in education, not inclusive education specifically, not disability, not assistive technology. There is one of the main models that is in literature is the Summer model. Is a model that shows how technology can be used to actually transform the learning process. So not only to substitute what we have as conventional methods of teaching, like using a projector rather than a whiteboard, using an interactive whiteboard rather than just a whiteboard, into the final step of redefining learning in ways that this wouldn't be possible in other ways. And this is very much aligned to the universal design for learning, because if we achieve this redefinition of the learning process with the use of technology, we may allow students to engage rather than just change the way we represent and making more accessible learning, but moving a step forward in creating opportunities for further engagement. And this is also aligned with another taxonomy of assistive technology of Chris Abbott that indicates that assistive technology is, of course, for training and rehearsing some skills and knowledge, for assisting learning in terms of having increasing functionality, but also for enabling learning in ways that this wouldn't be possible without the use of technology. So we see that any model that has to do with the integration of technology can be aligned, even if it's specified or not, to the use of technology and accessibility. And the final assumption is that teachers work as teams. So we are talking about school teams that work collaboratively in a whole school approach. So the last part of this guide is how to help the school teams understand that technology is a part of a comprehensive planning in schools, and how we can make connections between the classroom practice, the school, and the local community policies and culture in a broader assistive technology service. And this is achieved by collaborating, by seeking for our own training as well as our peers' training, by developing self-reflecting approaches to own practices within school, and of course by developing a monitoring mechanism for self-evaluating our services in the school and in the community, in the broader educational community. So school teams, according to the guide, need to consider assistive technology at a horizontal approach level, service level, school level, and classroom level. So there is nothing that is not relevant. That something that happens to the community is very relevant to something that happens to the school, and is very relevant that something that happens in the classroom level. And this is how actually the guide is structured in 4 sections. The first sections, it's a contextualization, providing the ecosystem that was mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. The second section, it's again about contextualization, but focusing on assistive technology specific aspects, and familiarizes teachers and school teams with some examples of assistive technology and accessibility applications. The third section is about pedagogical approaches and guidelines for designing learning. So what are the universal design principles? What is differentiated instruction, differentiation of learning, and how these are integrating the use of technology? And the fourth section is about how this is moved into a broader implementation plan on a whole school approach. So this is more or less the idea, the rationale of the guide. If you want to have access to the full guide, you can use this QR code. It's uploaded on the UNICEF website. It's of course free, and UNICEF is currently trying to develop that into a self-paced learning module that any country can use, translate, or use as they wish for capacity development of teachers. That's the first part. Tavishi, should I stop here? We discuss, and then if we have time, we check on the case study.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Katerina.
Thank you.
It was a really nice, comprehensive understanding of the guide. First, I would like to check if anyone has any questions to ask Katerina about the guide. Anything? Okay. Well, I have a question for you. So you spoke a lot about teachers and their role, and especially the last part of the whole school approach. I want to know, it sounds very nice that if, teachers, the system, and various stakeholders can come together and create this whole school approach. But realistically, do you think it's really possible in terms of resources for teachers to be involved in this? Because on ground, like, they don't have that much time. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, that's the main challenge.
Yeah.
I've been a teacher, okay? I've been a teacher for many years. I've also been a special education coordinator for many years, and this is the main challenge. And this is why I said teachers are not expected to do all this. So I think the key element to that, without suggesting that this is a solution, is understanding our role as educators as part of this team. So it's not about doing everything ourselves. It's about knowing who and how to collaborate, where to get the resources, how to seek for support, and how to work together. And I think if we have time to present the case study, this will show a live example of how this is doable. That doesn't mean that it doesn't get too much time. Speaking from experience now, not only from an academic perspective, is that practice makes perfect in the sense that if you start gradually in a very, very small scale, working with a single classroom, with a group of very dedicated colleagues on a single case study, and you develop some very good tools. I mean, talking about tools, I'm not only talking about artifacts, technology, but also tools as methodologies, then developing gradually from one classroom to another and then to the whole school, this can be doable. But it of course needs a lot of time and commitment.
Yeah, indeed. So from that, it requires time. Suppose we have teachers who can contribute to this and they can give time. What do you think, in your opinion, is the one thing in assistive technology that they miss out when they have to include AD in their classrooms? What is the first thing you think they don't think about?
Okay, I'll tell you what is the first thing they think about, and
Okay.
they miss out things. Assistive technology and the needs of children with disabilities usually is considered as part of the special teacher, the special classroom, the special technology. So what we miss out as classroom teachers is that this is not our work. This is not our business. You'll do this with your special education teacher. You do this in the special education class. I know we're talking about inclusive education, but most systems do have these individualized sessions, which are important. But what we fail is to take the objectives of these individualized sessions into the classrooms. So I think this is what we miss out as teachers, is that we consider that too much as a special thing.
Yeah, so you think the solution to that is just to change the attitude?
Yes, it's important. Awareness is the first step. So when some campaigns around the world do like educational systems and health systems are talking about early intervention, we miss out technology. Hopefully we won't, because technology is all around us now. So it's important to start this awareness right from the beginning,
Absolutely. Yeah. And a last question from me, and then we can move on to the case study. We talk a lot about how teachers and other stakeholders are really important in inclusive classrooms and inclusive AT, basically, in the classroom. How do we make sure that the student is empowered in this process? The student with a learning disability or anything, yeah.
That's very true. I think giving students a voice, not only during the learning process in the sense that giving opportunities for participation, but also during the learning design. Today we're all talking about co-design. So user involvement, user-centered approaches are not just interviewing students and knowing their needs. It's having learners part of this design and participation. So gaining this voice, giving this voice to students, it's important. Feel that they are part of any decision that is made for selecting the technology, for implementing the technology, for using the technology. And the other thing goes to the design of the learning activities that will actually give opportunities for participation. Because if you give a voice output device to a student with the nonverbal communication, but the lesson is not designed in a way that they be able to use that in the classroom, is not giving a voice. So it's very important. This co-participation, co-creation process in learning, it's important, I think.
All right, great. Thank you. Do we have any questions from anyone? Okay. Katerina, then we have time for the case study, so maybe you can present it.
Yes,
Yeah.
sure. I can share my screen again. Yeah. You can see the screen, right?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Okay, here it is. I won't take credit for this. This is a case study. It's a real case study example. You'll see some names and notes on the screen, on the slides, because these are actually the persons that were involved in this case study. My involvement was just of a support as an academic institution from my university. So this is a case study of Mike, a young man that we followed his educational life from the age of 5 until today. Today he's 12 years old. Apologies, I'm looking the other way because I'm sharing another screen now. So Mike started his education in early childhood education. He's assessed in with cerebral palsy and cortical visual impairment. So he faces physical mobility challenges as well as visual. And he's been assessed early in life for physical and digital access, and of course, and for learning and cognitive development as well. So at the school now he uses, so that's the last technology that he has, a large screen, the software Clicker 8 for building activities through a customized on-screen keyboard and cells, a CCTV camera for visual enhancement, and an adjustable school desk in the classroom. When this started, the idea was to create inclusive learning experiences for Mike. So this was the names that you see there are from educators and families who happen to be also educator. One of them is educator. So the school worked together very closely together as a school team. And this was a very good example for the guide. This case study was developed before the guide, so we used it for the guide as well. So what the team targeted was to remove barriers, physical, digital, and learning barriers, for creating an accessible school environment, in changing the school environment and involving all stakeholders. So early enough, they realized that we need to have a plan. So starting from the physical environment, there was a parking place created outside the school. There were ramps put in the classrooms, a lift. The school had a lift. It needed to be renovated. There was assessment for individual assistive technology, and created an accessible mainstream classroom. I may say here that one of the main challenges was that, this is in primary education, was that every year students change classrooms. I mean, the actual room of the class. In this case, it was a school decision that children could use the same classroom because it was built quite accessible. Other classrooms were made accessible throughout the year, but since that the environment was created as accessible right from the beginning, it was an agreement, and everybody agreed. Students agreed, the teachers agreed, though this was not a standard practice. As far as the learning environment, there was a whole mechanism employed into that. So the school team received professional development with the involvement of academic institutions, and how we came in as a European university in Cyprus. They were also be supported by disability and parents organizations, and they were also involved in European programs like the SCAPE project that I mentioned earlier. So school team received a lot of support in professional development from various stakeholders throughout the years. This professional development included training on differentiation for learning differentiated instruction, training on disability issues, conceptualizations of disability, constructions, issues of accessibility, And this was conducted for both the staff, but also the students. Also, some of the school team received training on the use of assistive technology, and co-teaching was also implemented. So the special education teacher was supporting Mike outside the classroom when needed, but most of the time was supporting the teacher in the classroom, implementing a co-teaching approach. In terms of the curriculum, there was this effort of bringing the curriculum in the individualized educational program together. So there was an interdisciplinary approach involved with the classroom teacher, the special education teacher, the speech and language therapist in the school, the family, the personal assistant, the escort of the child in school, and some rehabilitation professionals that were not in the public sector. This is a public school, but other rehabilitation professionals working with the children in private classes in the afternoon, they're also involved, and they were very welcome in the school. So there was a team built, this collaboration, sharing ideas and integrating those ideas into the national curriculum, but also in developing the individualized educational plan of the student that was evaluated every certain time amount of time, like 2 months, and then 3 months and 6 months, according to the improvement. So to maximize, in terms of individualized educational program, to maximize the aim was to maximize the learner's potential, and transferring that into the classroom. Differentiation of the learning objectives was implemented. So the content is the same. The learning objectives are individualized within the classroom setting. Using prior knowledge of the student and customizing this prior knowledge, customizing the learning content with the use of technology in the classroom with a flexible way. Using assistive technology, it was not enough, because to use assistive technology, the learning content developed in the classroom needed to be accessible. So teachers needed to get some training on how they make their course material accessible. There was a regular assessment of both the individual educational plan and what goes on in the classroom. And there were short-term and long-term objectives identified. So this is the technology used. These are some of them. Oh, the next are actual screenshots. These are examples from the internet. So that's the CCTV used. And it was, it is connected with a computer on a big touch screen that is connected to the whiteboard in the classroom. This is a clicker 8. I will show some real screenshots of the child's interface. They also used Foxit for making PDFs readable and more accessible. So that's from earlier stage. They're not used today, but these are the screenshots I had. So this is the use of the the use of clicker 8, and this is how a customized at the early stages of first grade in primary education, how an on-screen keyboard was customized to move from basic reading gradually into more independent writing, because the existing on-screen keyboards were not helpful. We needed to add the letters they've learned each time, and then making that accessible with contrast and what is used to. Today, he's an excellent user of a totally developed on-screen keyboard, but this is how this was developed. This case study was started before COVID and was continued COVID and afterwards. So other technologies were used. We needed to transfer everything on remote remote learning during COVID. Going into primary school, moving the assistive technology, that was another challenge, moving the assistive technology at home during school closure, using accessible documents online for remote learning. So started using dictates on Word for him to be able to do his writing using read aloud as embedded accessibility features, to listen to the worksheet that the teachers were sending home for all students. So there were a lot of challenges, but there are also a lot of opportunities. In Cyprus, there is a lack of comprehensive assistive technology service delivery system, and not only in Cyprus, in many countries around the world. There is limited assistive technology awareness and competences. There is lack of pedagogical support, and we need all this team building to achieve this. This is indeed a time-consuming process, as Tavishi said, and sometimes there are limited resources in terms of human resources as well as in terms of technology resources. And often there is an inconsistency between what we do individually with a child and what we do in the classroom. But there are examples of effective practices. The family's awareness is growing, is increasing, especially after the COVID pandemic, that everybody turned into how we make this possible if we're not physically in a classroom. There are lots of higher educational curricula that are revised towards inclusion and accessibility, so more professionals, educators, rehabilitation professionals, but in other sectors, law professionals, in business and everywhere, are growing awareness about inclusion, disability, and the use of technology. Of course, the policies that we have in hand, and the lots of research projects that the ones that you are also working right on, they create a lot of opportunities. So I'm optimistic about it. Thank you. These are my contact details if you need any further information of what we talked about today.
Thank you, Katerina.
Thank you.
Anyone has any questions on this amazing case study?
Tavishi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Well, more than a question is a comment. First of all, great presentation. Thank you. It's really, you went very deep into the problem. So I think that means a lot for us listening at you and for students and for teachers, I mean. I think that, well, I don't know if you know the situation in Italy. In Italy, we don't have any more special schools. So any child with disability is enrolled in regular classroom. And that it's great, of course, because it means a lot under several points of view. The only problem sometimes we face, it's how much a teacher can be prepared in the disability of the students they are looking for. This has been a problem years ago because the same teacher, sorry, 1 year had to take care of a student with epilepsy, for instance. The year after, a student partially sighted or blind, or with a disability, psychological disability, and so on. This made a big problem in some way. So I think that is one of the points we have still to focus a bit. First of all, can we have more than one student in the same classroom with a disability, because maybe there are different disabilities, and the preparation of teachers to know more about the different kinds of disabilities. And of course, they don't have to be doctors, no, or nurses, but of course, be more aware of the students they're taking care of. It's just a comment because depending on the countries, as I said, in Italy, I don't have special schools anymore. So maybe I have more students with a disability in the same classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may comment on this comment. First of all, I'm an Italy fan. I don't speak Italian, but I almost consider myself half Italian. I'm just joking. I have a very, very good collaboration years with Italy, and I have family living there. So I'm visiting Italy very often, and I know the system. And we have worked with, also Tavisha has worked with associations in Italy, North Italy especially, but also in South, with lots of centers. I've visited schools. We use the example of Italy of closing the special schools very much here in Cyprus, though we received the comment that, okay, they did that, but they didn't succeed. And I think the issue, and I agree with you with the challenge of teachers knowing some, because we talk about inclusive education, we talk about the social model, but impairment is actually there. I mean, the diagnosis is actually there. You cannot ignore it. I'm not suggesting that what I will say in a minute is a solution, but it's a way towards that. This is why the inclusive education funds and academics, we push towards collaborations and co-teaching. This is what I was also trying. I worked at the Ministry of Education here many years, and we have special teachers, as many special teachers as schools, and maybe more, and we have them walking from a school to another. You can have one or two of these special teachers as permanent staff in schools working with the teachers in the classroom. So the special teachers are the ones that are educated to know, not as doctors, but to acknowledge, know, and understand the impairment of a variety of different students. So even if the mainstream teacher does not have this expertise, if they work together with someone that has the expertise and they are given the time to plan learning and activities together, so increasing the human resources in a classroom, then you target this issue. Of course, professional development of mainstream teachers should include an awareness about disability. But at the end of the day, I'm sometimes saying that if you have a child with visual impairment and a child with dyslexia in the classroom, you need to increase your reading, what you give as not non-visual, but in audio, for example. Giving audio for both of them works. So it's not understanding the diagnosis and the impairment, but understanding the barriers that are there. And I think this collaboration can help in that. I'm saying it's not a panacea, it's not the solution, but I think after all, not all of us know everything. So that's why we.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. Thank you.
Alessia? Sorry, we can't hear you.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
me? Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was everything super interesting for me. I'm Italian, and I growing up, I had some peers at school with disabilities. So I think that I can bring like a small angle in the discussion. And honestly, I think that, of course, the challenge is there for teachers. What is more challenging to me, on the other hand, is having 25 children in the classroom, not to have them, the diversity that is there. Every child has a different way of learning, with or without disabilities. And and to me, the big challenge for teacher is to find a way to adapt the curricula to each of them and the speed of each of them. So probably we should, of course, if this is maybe another element to add to the discussion, but having big classrooms is for sure one of the big challenges for teachers and for students too.
What I missed in the case study, and thank you, that's an important detail, is this is a classroom of 14 kids. So, and it wasn't. This started as a classroom of 25. There is a legislation here in Cyprus that says about the education of children with disabilities, which is very, very old. It's not inclusion. They claim it's inclusion, but it's not. And it says when you have a child with disability in the classroom, you get less students. And we applied for that. The school applied for that. We supported that as an academic institution. And they said, oh, that was when we had 32. Now the limit is 25, and these are 24. we said no. If the limit is now 25, the 24 is not less students. So it was really a fight with the Ministry of Education, and then they decided to split that classroom into two. So this quite, not very, but quite successful case study, it had only 14 students and not 25. That the rest of the school has 25 students, and the rest of the school also has students with disabilities in there. I think they accepted this because it was based on a project as well, and they wanted to make it work. But I totally agree with you, and it's again an issue of resources. And I know that ministries will say, well, but this costs a lot of money. What they need to realize is that in long term, it will cost less money. It's just we need to start making this happen. And I totally agree. And thank you for bringing that up.
I actually have a slightly operational question based on this. I don't know the Italian system myself, but when these schools, special schools were shut, was the funding and the resources from there put into main schools? Or where did the funding go for it? And if it was put into main schools, did it help in making them inclusive? I don't know.
To whom are you asking?
Anyone.
Italians.
Fabrizio, Alexia, and Katerina.
I mean,
since all three of you.
I'm not
yeah.
an expert, but in Italy, if for what I know, there was never a different system. It was always an inclusive system. I don't know since when. I could check on it, but for sure there were never special schools. So it just, I mean, at least for what is my understanding, my experience, it was always structured like this, as an inclusive.
Well, yes and no. Special
Yeah,
schools, no, of course. In some way, it started somewhere. And it started in 1978, when it has been the big reform of the health system. When the psychiatric hospitals started closing in 78, at that time, it has been also the idea to do not have anymore the special schools. But of course, they didn't close suddenly. It took a bit of time. For instance, the rehabilitation center I have here in Rome, it was a school in the old time. And it was a regular school. Only in the primary school, I wasn't there at that time, they enrolled both children with and without disability. But it was very experimental in the 70s. So things moved and changed. Of course, it started somewhere. And again, it was the 78. It went parallel to the closing of the psychiatric hospitals. That was the time. Very difficult. For me, it's still quite difficult. I'm a neurologist, and I have been a teacher for a while in these, for teachers in special schools. And that was the main problem we were always facing. As I said before, every year maybe you were a teacher of a different kind of student with a different impairment. And sometimes it created huge confusion, of course, for the teachers and for the families and for the student, him or herself. More or less, things are moving better, of course, because everybody's learning from experience. But the important at that time was to understand and to close these special schools that were a real ghetto for everybody. It's so important that we grow our students, our youngsters together with, and that means that you have something in your mind since you are a child, and you grow together with your friends that can have a disability and not.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is one of the main points in any case.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Fabrizio.
emphasizing it.
Thank you, everyone. We are running over time now, so we'll have to close the webinar. It was a very interesting discussion. I would like to thank Leonidas and Katerina
you.
for speaking today. And really, there was a lot of knowledge I think we had today over here that we can soak in and think about. Under this project, we have a series of webinars. So there will be another webinar coming up. I hope you would be interested to join that as well. All of it will be on inclusive education and, of course, an aspect of digitalization. So thank you very much.
Sorry, are we going to have the presentation? Is it possible to have them for us also to the presentation we had from Katerina?
Sure.
From the other from Leonidas, is it possible?
Yes.
I can share it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can send it to you, Tavishi, and you can share it if you want.
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect. I will
Thank you
send
very
it
much.
after this call.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for everyone else who joined. Thank you for the support.